Thank you. All right, so welcome to today's class. This is day 3 of our 5-day course. And so far we've done our pair and colour wheel. And then yesterday we did our clouds and we all found that a little bit challenging. I think maybe the cloud was a little bit grey and it would have been nicer if we'd had a different picture, probably. And often that's key, you know. I think the picture you're painting is so important. You can embellish things, you can brighten them up, you can change them around, but you really need a good reference photo. Okay. Like we were just talking about, hop onto Facebook and have a look for those free photos because they're fabulous. Okay, so in today's class, we're going to be painting grass, which is kind of fun. I like doing grass because you can be a bit looser. So these are your notes for the day. We've got one page there just talking about grass and all the things that you're going to need for class and how you can make different strokes. And then the image that we're doing today is this little one. Oops. So you can see on there there's actually sky and then water or sea. We're not going to do the sea. We're just going to do it all blue sky. Maybe a bit of cloud if you want to throw a bit of cloud in there, but we're not going to bother with all this detail back in here because the class is really about doing the grass and making that little pathway just there and building up the layers and layers of grass and trying to be loose and not make patterns. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the ocean unless you feel like doing that, but it'll take a bit longer. So the first part of the class today, we're going to do a bit of a sketch in your art diary. I keep trying to use my reverse side. I don't know where I am in the camera. We're going to do a black and white one with charcoal first. So that's just going to be a nice little way to practice to sort of get familiar with the picture. And this is the process I usually use when we're doing a reference photo. So we always start off with a charcoal sketch for the first 20 minutes or so. I'll try and keep it to 10 because we've only got 2 hours today. And then we move on to the colour version. And it's good to have a little rehearsal, isn't it? If you've done something once, then you're always better at it the second time, usually. Often people like their charcoal picture better than their colour one. So we'll see what happens. But we won't spend a whole lot of time on the first part. So for that, you will need an art diary or drawing paper. So something like that. Most of us have one of those lying around. And you'll need some charcoal. So I have a big stick like that, long skinny one. I like willow charcoal for these sorts of things because it's really soft and lovely, nice to use. I've got another shorter stick there. These little Montmartre willow charcoal tins are about $8 or something, they're really cheap. I don't usually recommend Montmartre because it's not a very good brand. But for the charcoal, it's okay. And you just get a little tin like that and they're all different sizes. So you've got fat ones and thin ones and long ones and stuff. The foil is on the end to keep your fingers clean, but that doesn't usually work out very well. You just need to peel it off then because you can't get to the stick. And I always end up breaking them too because the long sticks are usually a bit too long and they become a bit annoying. So I like to break them. The other thing you'll need is your kneadable eraser, probably, if you want to rub anything out or blend anything in. Coolio. So we'll get started with that. I'm just going to switch over my screen and hope that works. Worked yesterday, so we should be fine. Bear with me while I press some buttons. Looking good so far. Here we are, hooray! How good is that? And there we are, good. Good, good. I'll just fix the focus. So now you can see my desk. You'll see my cloth is getting dirtier and dirtier by the day. Mind, that's what we're here for, isn't it? To make a mess. So today's picture is in landscape format. So you want to turn your paper around so it's long ways. I'm just going to mute everyone if that's okay, but please don't hesitate to speak up if you have a question or anything, and we'll get stuck into it. Lovely. So there is my art diary. I'll just move everything over a bit. Okay. So as I said, I've got a long bit of charcoal and a shorter piece. So I'm just using those because I find those quite nice to work with. That's the willow. Oh, sorry, just adjusting the zoom there a bit. It's gone too close now. Hang on a minute. All right, there we go. Better. Lovely. All right, so landscape format, you need to have your image nearby. I've given you a black and white as well as a colour on your notes. So this little one at the top is your black and white version, and we're going to be referring to that for this exercise. So the idea of doing things in black and white is to get familiar with the tones of the image. And by tones, I mean the lights and the darks. And you can see on this image that there's quite a lot of dark and not much light, isn't there? So you've got quite a, I mean, it's half and half really. You've got light in the sky and the water, which is going to be sky for us today. And then you've got dark in the grass in the foreground. So it's quite a strong contrast of tones. I'm just going to see if I've got my little tonal scale here. Oh, I do. Excellent. So a tonal scale, this is a tonal scale. It's in plastic so that I don't put my grubby fingers all over it. I'll take it out because it's a bit hard to see. These are wonderful because you can use these up against your picture and you can find your darkest and your lightest tones. So when you lie it down like that, see, I can see that this is all quite dark because it's kind of the same tone as this. And then as you slide it along, you can kind of find the other tones within the image. Turn it over. And so if you're looking for your lights in the skies, you can kind of find the same sort of tones. It might not be as warm or cool, but you can look for the tones in the image. And the easiest way to do that is to squint at it. So if you're looking at this now, you can kind of squint and you can sort of see where the swatch of the tone blends into the color on your image. And that's how you find your tone of something. So then, just going back to colors for a minute, if you've got your colors handy, you can do the same thing with your colors. So then you can put them in order from light to dark. And you can kind of do the same thing. So you can hover your tonal scale over your colors, like this one, for instance. This is blue, my light blue. All right. If I squint at that, it actually comes in at around there. If I squint, because what we're looking for is tone, not color. Okay. So even though I think that's light blue, it's actually probably more mid blue because it's sitting around about there, which is at a value 5. If I look at this pale green, I can do the same thing. See, that's lighter. So I've got to come over to here and kind of find, looking through my little eyelashes, squinting my eyes, it sits around here. So that's quite light. So I can say, well, that's one of my lighter colors. So it's a really good little tool to have if you're trying to find your tonal scale and figuring out, you know, whether you've got a good range of darks to lights. That's a grey, so grey is going to be easy to do. It sits about there. So it's not a lot darker than my light blue. Amazing, isn't it? When you're looking at tones. So a handy little tool, if you see them in an art shop or somewhere, grab one. They're not that cheap. I think they're sort of maybe $20 or something for that. You can print them off the internet, but they're not as precise because your printer won't get the same values with the, but yeah, I keep it in plastic just to keep it nice and clean so we don't get grubby fingerprints all over it. Anyway, back to charcoal. Okay, so let's look at our black and white picture. And my dog's barking at something, I don't know what. What we're going to do is just draw up what's called a thumbnail. So thumbnails are usually little sketches, you know, about this big, but we're going to go slightly larger than that. So we want to draw up, it's about the same proportion as your page, so about A3. I always try to work, or A4, sorry, I always try to work within A4 or A3 dimensions when we're doing these kinds of exercises. It's just easier because you can get the paper in that size. Okay, so this is our frame, and we're going to put a little bit of information inside here. What we first want to do is find the line between the light and the dark, okay? So it sits at about halfway. Now, if we were putting water in, then that would break this up into thirds, which is the ideal situation for a landscape. You usually work in thirds, and you never usually, unless you're a rule breaker, you never usually have your horizon at the halfway mark. You always have it slightly above or slightly below, because it's aesthetically pleasing that way. Horizons usually don't look too good if they're stuck straight in the middle of the page. So you can see the line of the grass here is a little bit lower. Oh, she's barking at. The line of the grass is a little bit lower than halfway. Halfway is about there. So that's good. It sort of sits just below. So if you find your halfway mark on your thumbnail, and then maybe start just below that and just do a very rough sort of line following kind of the shape of that grass line that runs through the image there. Okay, so that means that all this bottom section is going to be dark, and all above that will be sort of light. Now, because we're doing this in grey, we probably just want to be a little bit soft. See, there's a bit of cloud up in the sky there, so we can just swish this across. Don't put too much down because we don't want it to get too dark. Swish that across, pretend that's clouds. And when we put this in colour, we'll do a blue sky like we did yesterday with the clouds. You can say that's a bit of a cloudy sky. We don't need to put a whole lot of detail in there. But what we want to do is practice with the grass. So you can see on the picture, we've got a little path running through here. It's very dark. If you look at your colour version, you might be able to see it a bit easier, or if you've got it on a screen. So the path kind of starts at about, I don't know, a quarter of the way across, and it curves around like this. So the hard part of doing any kind of 3D image like this is getting it to look like it is actually, you know, 3D and not a flat line. And we'll be using tone to do that. So looking at the path, you can see we've got little bits of lighter grey through here. So if you get your little bit of charcoal and just do some very light kind of shapes, see that little light shape through there? It's like a reflection on the path. It looks like in the black and white. It's actually lighter coloured dirt. So that'll be where the light from the sky is finding it. Okay. And then on the sides and in the very front, it's a bit darker. So if you press harder with your charcoal, we're just going to darken that off. So we're just practicing this. This is just a little exercise to get familiar with the image. And either side, you can see there's little dark areas sort of on the edge of the path, and then a few of them kind of come in towards the middle so that they're creating those little shapes. And we want shadow. This is really dark in here, beautiful dark shadow. So it looks quite sort of interesting, doesn't it? It's intriguing. I want to go and have a look and see what's at the end of this path. How do I get down there to the water? So when we do this in the reds and the oranges, it's going to make it pop. It'll be beautiful. But having said that, charcoal is also a lovely medium to work in and a wonderful way to learn about tone. So if you're interested in doing charcoal, then by all means, you know, see if you can find a class or an online thing or some YouTube stuff about charcoal work, because it's a beautiful medium to work with. All right, so we've got to have a little bit of a path there. So what we wanted was a bit of light on the top and sort of shadows on either side. That's telling me that the path is kind of falling down, isn't it? It's raised up a little bit perhaps. and it's got this falling down edge that goes down in towards the grass. So it's really dark. And to get it even darker, you can press harder with your charcoal. So that's the lovely thing. It's the same as pastels. The harder you press, the more intense the colour will be, or the tone. And then when you go light, you can just get really soft, gentle coverage. Okay, beautiful. Now, if you wanted to remove some of your charcoal, if you feel like that's not, it's too dark or something like that, the kneadable eraser is your best friend. And so if you wanted to take out perhaps just a small sliver, I'll just show you, what you can do is knead the eraser into like a knife blade edge, and you can pretty much sort of draw with it. So you can take it into here and just remove some of that charcoal if you want to. You will find that you'll have to keep finding a clean edge, because what it does is pick the charcoal up and put it onto the eraser. So you need to keep finding a new edge, because otherwise you'll just be putting it back down onto your page. So your kneadable eraser is wonderful for getting the lights back in. Fabulous it is. So very, very handy little tool. All right, so what we want to do next is fill in all this bottom section with sort of a mid-tone grey. Now, if you've got a short stick of charcoal, you'll be able to light flat and just run it across there. If it's a willow charcoal, you find that they're not always smooth or flat, because it's a natural piece of burnt wood charcoal. And so it's not always going to be smooth, but you should be able to manage it. If you can't break it, if it might be a bit too long, that's why I don't like the long ones. They're just too long to work with. Okay, so we want to get a little bit of charcoal down on there, because this is going to be the dirt or the earth underneath the grass. And then we're just going to smudge it in with your fingers, just like we do with pastels. You can blend the charcoal in like that. Keep the path nice and clean as it is, because we want to make that quite prominent. So what we're doing now is just building up a really nice background to put the grass on top of. Okay. And then the next part of the exercise that we're doing here will be just to practice your grass strokes, because this is important. When you're doing this sort of thing, it's really easy to fall into patterns. It's really easy to make everything the same height or the same size or the same direction. And so working with the pastels and the charcoal today, we're going to try and keep it kind of a bit random and try to stay quite loose and not get too caught up with patterns. So the way to do that is to keep moving your arm. And I know it's often we'll sit and we'll just move our hand like this, right? But when you just do that, you're very stuck. There's not anywhere to go. You can't really go very far if you're just moving your hand around. So what you want to do is move your whole arm, and that way you've got a lot more freedom of movement, and you get to change direction, and you can kind of lift your elbow up and put it down. You can twist your hand around, and you can twist the charcoal or the pastel around, and you just have a lot more freedom of movement. So it's a good practice to get into, even with pastels, to move your arm, not your hand, unless you're doing very precise work. If you're really focusing on a tiny little bit, then of course you'll do it like that with your hand. But we want to get a bit of movement and flow in here. So I've got my short stumpy piece. I'm just going to start to do grass. Okay, so soft, light movements like this. Now we've got a few little tall ones that sit up above everything else. And then we've got lots and lots of shorter ones. So I'm just doing up and down, changing direction, changing pressure. So pressing hard here and there, and then lighter, changing the way I hold the charcoal. So at the end is a really good option. If you've got a mid to long stick, just hold it at the end so that it's kind of looser in your hand, and it kind of wanders across the page without being too hard or defined. So what the secret we want to do here is build up enough grass to fill in the area so we can't actually see the edge of the dirt. It's where it meets the sky. So we want to kind of colour that in until it's all sort of, you can't see the edges. So it's going to take a lot of grass to do that. So just keep moving your hand around. Sometimes I don't even lift it off the page. I just keep it on the page and press sort of light when you go up and heavy when you go down. Pull it across in different directions. You can see all this grass is, it's probably a bit windy, and so it's blowing it in different directions. The grass in the foreground is shorter, so it's going to be sitting shorter here as you are closer to it. And then the grass in the background is a little taller and further away. So we've still got lovely short ones that sit here in the background. So it's about layering as well, starting at the back and coming forward. Okay, once you've got a nice bunch of grass like that, then you can move over to the other side. So we'll put the reed things in after. So move over to the side. At the end of the path, you can see there's a little bit of grass there, to kind of just coming across the end of the path and covering it up, basically. So we've got a few pieces that sit up here in front. To get a bit of the lighter grass in at the end, we'll use the eraser and just take a bit of this out, and that will give us the whiter or the lighter grasses. So same on the other side, we're just filling it up nice and gently, gently. Changing direction, changing your pressure, changing the height of your grasses, having a few harder strokes that are darker and heavier, and then some lighter ones, just to get some variation going on in there. I'm going to come back over in the front areas. You just want to thicken up the front bit here. All right, so I just want to make that nice and thick. When we do this with pastel, we'll put the dirt down first, and we'll do it quite dark, and then we can put all the brighter or lighter colours of grass over the top. Adding a few dark ones too, of course, to give it some variation. Okay. So this is just a good little practice to get nice and loose with your arm and your hands. Just putting those big long ones in there. You can see a few long ones that sort of are sitting there and poking up. And they've got like a reed thingy shape on the tip, so you can just put a little shape on the top like that, like a pointy top, just to give it a bit of interest. Put one down here and amongst the other ones, just to create, so they don't all sit up above the grasses either. So we don't, like I said before, we don't want to make patterns. We want to try and keep this very random and natural looking. And so to do that, you've got to think about, not all the reeds would be sitting up above the grasses, even though that's what we can see. There'll be some down in here too. So you can do a few little dark shapes and make, some go horizontal, some go straight up. And the same with the grass. Some of the grass is running on an angle, so it's off to the side a little bit. And that's because it's probably windy down there on the water that we're not painting. So that's basically a basic start, isn't it, for our little image that we're going to do. And then you can come back in if you feel like you want to darken up the path again. So you can always come back with your darks and darken up areas as you go, because we tend to sort of lose them sometimes. So can you see now how doing that has made the little path look like it's kind of going off into the distance? So, and it's all about the shadow and the tones that sort of send it off further away. And as it gets away from us in the distance, it gets darker, so you can't actually see where it finishes. It just sort of disappears into the grasses there. But it makes it interesting, because now we want to go and have a look and see what's over there. Well, I do. But not if it's cold. Looks like it might be a bit chilly. All right, so if you've got plenty of grass on there, see how we've filled all that up now? So we haven't got any gaps. It's kind of really full and lush and dark. And what we can do now is see those little grasses in the foreground. There's a few little light ones there that this is obviously a painting or two. It's not a photograph, but someone's painted it. And we've got some lovely little light strands of grass just hanging around there in the foreground. So that's telling us maybe the light is catching on those bits of grass. So you can use your kneadable eraser, make a little knife edge with it. So knead it until you get a sharp edge that you can kind of draw with, or a point, whatever works for you. And then you can just sort of mark in a few light marks through there. When we do this with pastel, we'll do it with white pastels or light pastels. I like using very light yellow instead of white sometimes because it's warmer and not quite so harsh. But that's up to you. If you like the white, then you can do it in white. So just using this to get a bit of light back into it. The other cool thing you could use, if you have one, is a charcoal pencil. Let's see how that works. Yeah, so that works really nicely. You do need to clean it off each time though, because it picks up the dark. So I can use my charcoal pencil to put in some lights too. Charcoal pencils are the bomb, honestly. They're better than a pastel pencil sometimes, just for your whites, you know, if you really want to get a bit of white in, then I really like the charcoal pencils. And I remember when I worked at Art Shed, they were often, you know, we'd get them all in and they'd sell so quickly. So I used to buy heaps of them because you couldn't always get them. But they're really good for your highlights and things. They work nicely with pastel. So either your kneadable eraser or your white charcoal pencil. Who knew you could get white charcoal? Sounds like an oxymoron to me, but anyway, there you go. So that's just a very quick little exercise to practice this image and to get familiar with it. So we might move on now to the colour version if everybody's ready to do that. I'll just switch the screen over and see how you're all going. All right, looking very studious there. How did you all go? Did that feel good? Is it nice to have a practice? Oh, good. Yeah, good, Louise. Cool, cool. Yeah, and Janelle. Yeah, great. Great. Karen. Yeah, lovely. Lovely. Yeah. So that's just a little rehearsal. So now we can get into the colour part if you're happy to move on and do the fun bit. We also got to do the hard bit first. Well, it's not that hard, but you know. Okay, so I'll go back to my other screen. And I'm sure it's going to work again. And in the meantime, just grab out your sheet of pastel paper. Lovely. So I have chosen a terracotta colour today. So pop your drawing aside. And you've got this lovely terracotta colour, which is quite nice. I can see a lot of orange in our picture today. So I think that the terracotta is a good choice because it'll give me a very nice base to work with. Just getting everything to look right here. Just going to adjust the focus. There we go. All right. So a brown paper would be fine. Something, even a black would be quite lovely. I like working on black paper. It's really nice. It makes your colours just pop. And we're going to do that tomorrow when we do the rooster because he's on black and he will look amazing once we add all those beautiful bright colours. So bright colours tomorrow, earthy colours today. Okay, so this is a colour fix sheet and it's got that lovely gritty texture to it. So this is what I've been working on for years and years. I really like this paper, but I have recently been using Pastel Matte, Clairefontaine Pastel Matte, which is quite a lot more expensive, but really nice to work with. But this is a great paper too, so highly recommend. All right, so here's my colour palette. I'll show you what I've got in here. I've tried to put them in some sort of order of light to dark. Okay, so I have a black. Probably should get a bit of paper to show you. Just a minute. Let's do some swatches. Yeah. So I've got black because we'll use a little bit of black. I don't use a lot of black because I find it very heavy and dull, but it will be quite powerful for some of the darkest grasses. Then I've got, what's this one, a dark brown. Now, if you don't have all of these, just pick out your browns and your blacks and you want whatever green you have. If you've got a terracotta, you should do if you have the Art Spectrum pack or a basic set. Terracotta kind of colour like that. It's probably not called terracotta, it's called something else. I've got a bit of red because there's some red in there. I can see red in the path. You often find red pastels are quite hard. That one's a bit hard. Got a couple of greens. Probably don't need all those greens, but I'll throw them in anyway. Because, do you know, they just can't, they're almost the same, those two. That one side. You just can't get enough greens, honestly. That's a lovely green. So yellow, so green, yellow, brown, pretty much everything in your box probably. Bit of grey, grey for the sky, bit of cloud, and blue for your sky. And this bright green, which is quite lovely. I know you probably wouldn't have that one, but it's quite lush. And then white, which looks great on my paper because it's dirty. So that's my little palette. And as I said, if you don't have all of those colours, then that's fine. Oh, blue, I forgot blue. This blue, I love this blue. Gosh, it's nice. So that'll be lovely too in the grasses. There's actually a bit of blue in there. You can put anything in there really, as long as they're kind of darkish colours. So you can see all these colours are in with kind of the mid to dark tones in there. And then we've only got a few lights. So we'll be working mostly within these darks for the grasses and of course the lights for the sky. So that's my little colour selection. And I'll just pop that aside over there. We can also use charcoal if you feel like using some charcoal too. So I'll pop a bit of that in there. And I've got my white charcoal pencil or a white pastel pencil if you have one of those handy. And we'll get started. So we're going to do a similar process first up with the charcoal. Make sure you've got your reference photo handy. So we want to make sure that that's propped up nicely in front of you so it's easy to see. And you can look at that for reference. When I have my reference photo up, I always put it so it's right in front of me so I don't have to move my head too much because you spend more time looking at that than you do at your own painting, usually. Let's grab a bit of charcoal to start with and we'll just very lightly mark in that horizon line again. So it doesn't have to be too precise, just make it fairly light just to give yourself a bit of a guide for where to put your blues and then to start your grass. Okay, so it's about there. So charcoal's lovely for drawing up things. You can take it off nice and easily. You can go over it really easily. All right, so let's put in some blue sky. I'm going to use this light blue, which we worked out is not that light anyway. It's very dirty and it's a big chunky stick, but sometimes that's a good thing because then I can get more coverage. So let's just pop this lovely blue in here, all the way down to your horizon line. Just wiping that across. It's a lovely big stick, so it's not taking very long to do. If your sticks are shorter, it might take a little longer, but that's okay. Wiping that over. And then I want to push that in to the paper. So you're thinking, gosh, you know, how's the blue going to go on this orange? It's going to go beautifully. because you can actually fill up your paper with pastel and cover up the color of the paper if you want to. Or, and this is the lovely thing, you've got an option, you can kind of leave it sort of looking through like that, because remember, blue and orange are complementary, aren't they? There are complementary colours, and so they work really nicely together. So if I want to get a bit of texture into the sky and maybe let some of the orange show through, then that's going to be quite lovely. And as I said, we're not going to bother with the water today. You can if you want to, but I'm not, because that's not what this one's about. Now, I quite like how that's looking with the orange showing through. If you don't like it, then you can pop more pastel over the top and thicken it up and fill it all in. So you can potentially just put another layer of your blue over. Remember to tip off your dust, try not to blow it. And push that into. Remember, you can use 3 fingers to do this because we've got a big area, and pull it across horizontally so you get a nice wide sky kind of feeling. I know you might think that doesn't matter which way you pull it, but it actually does, because it just seems to communicate better what it is we're looking at if we move the pastel around in the direction we want. So now we've got this lovely blue sky and lovely blue fingers. And so I've got my little towel here. I'm going to give them a wipe. Now, I picked up some grey before because I thought, oh, I might make those clouds a little bit grey, but I don't know. I think grey is going to be a bit too boring, a bit too heavy. So I might try this blue, this dark blue. So this is just going to swish a bit of across here like this. You see in the painting or the picture that there's a little bit of darkish blue running through there. Okay, so just put a little bit on, quite light, don't press too hard. You just want to make it sit on the surface, and then we'll just sort of push it in a little bit. Okay, and we'll just push it in. So don't press too hard. If you press really hard, it's just going to blend in too much. But if you just go nice and light, it'll leave it sort of sitting on the top without being too strong. And I can get this nice wispy sort of effect. That's kind of nice, isn't it? And let's put some white in now, just to create a bit of cloud. So pick up your white, make sure it's clean, which I didn't. So now I've got some yellow in there too. And just sort of scatter that around where you think there might be some clouds or where you want to copy the image. So these all look like they're fairly windy clouds, wind-blown clouds. So we can do like the cirrus ones we did yesterday, sort of wispy, not too thick. Okay. So once you've got your white on there, then you can do the same thing. You can just kind of pull it across, sort of gently merge everything together. So we're getting this lovely, soft, gentle sort of cloud going on. That's quite nice. Might just pop a bit more dark stuff up here in the top, and miss the top bit. Add a bit more white. So you see, you can keep building this up as much as you want to. You could turn this into a big stormy sky if you wanted to. You could really, get stuck into it and make it however you want to have it. Coolio. All right. So I quite like what that's doing, but as I said, if you want to, add more clouds or whatever, then feel free to do that. It'll be a bit harder to do once we've put the grass in, because the grass will sit up in front of the sky. So one of the other rules of thumb that I usually work by is to work from the background to the foreground with pastel. I find it much easier to do that rather than trying to get in behind things later on. So you can imagine if you were trying to get in behind the grass at the end to fix the sky, and you've got grass coming up as high as this, in front, it's going to be really difficult to get in behind it and redo the sky. So when you're looking at an image like this, you really want to think about the layering or the order of where everything is, okay? So obviously the sky and the water is behind all the grass. So you need to be working on the sky and everything first to get that right, or as right as you can. You can always go back and touch things up, but it's just really difficult to get in and do big work behind fine things like grass. So, you know, we could get back in there afterwards and sort of just highlight a few of the clouds if you wanted to, you know, if you feel like you wanted to add a bit more white or something like that, or make them more fluffy, or put more dark in, or whatever you wanted to do, then, you know, you could do that easily afterwards, but as long as you haven't got grass sitting in front of it. Okay, so now's the time to think about how much information or detail you want to include in the sky. But for this class, we're not going to spend too much time on that, because I do want to get stuck into the grass and really, you know, have a go at making grass and thinking about patterns and trying not to make patterns and all of that sort of thing. Righty-ho, so let's get on with the bottom half of this. What we're going to do is block in this bottom section with some darks. Then we'll have a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll start to grow the grass. So I hope that sounds okay with you. So to block in, let's mark in where the path is sitting again. So using your little bit of charcoal you might have handy, our little path kind of curves like this. Okay, just marking that in so we've got a bit of an idea of where it sits. Got our path like that. And then at the end of it, we've got grass and stuff coming over. Okay, so that's where the path is. So what we want to do is make the path, I'm going to make mine red and orange. I might mix the two together. So I want to get a bit of red on here, and I'm going to add the darks afterwards to get the shadow. But so the red will pop against all the grasses, and I think that will be fun to have it nice and bright. Now, if you've got a darker red, that could be good too. Or if you want to use an orange or a brownie sort of colour, that's okay as well. Whatever you think. And, you know, colour choices come with practice. You sort of start to figure out what works and what doesn't. And every painting is different. So there's no one hard, fast rule about colour choices. It really is dependent on whatever you're painting. So that's going to glow in the dark, that one. So I've got a bit of red on there. I'm going to add a bit of my orange. So this is the same colour as the paper, which is kind of cool, because I can sort of work with the paper colour as well to be part of my art. I'm just going to pop a bit of that in there. I'll come back and darken it up later. So to put our dark down underneath, I've got a dark brown. Have you got a dark brown? Everyone should have some sort of a dark brown, hopefully. If you don't have a dark brown, then maybe I want to say black, but yeah, I guess you could put black down. That would be okay. Yeah, that'd be okay. But a dark brown would be better, because then we can get a bit of black into the grass and have even darker grasses if you have one. So I'm not sure what this colour is called, but something dark. And we're just going to fill up all of this dark area across here. Where you meet the blue, just kind of keep that sort of fuzzy if you can. Try not to have a really hard line between your blue and your brown, because we want to keep that line sort of soft and not hard. If you make a hard line, it's going to be harder to kind of cover it up later. So just keep it kind of soft and swishy. All right, so we're just going to put some brown on here. Again, I've got a little square stick. This brand is called Blue Earth, and it's my new favourite brand because they're soft. They're beautiful, beautiful, soft pastels. And they come in sets, so you can get a set of greens. I think there's 28 greens or something. Oh, it's glorious. They're not cheap though. But as we were saying yesterday, your basic good ones to use for now are your Art Spectrum. I've used Art Spectrum for years and years, and they're fabulous. Okay, so I've got my brown down. Get down brown. Just going to swish a little bit of that across my path just to get some shadow happening in there. So remember those little shapes that we had happening in the path? This is why it's good to do the charcoal version, because you sort of study the image and then have a rehearsal basically. Lovely. So once you've got your brown on there, it's looking pretty dirty now, isn't it? I quite like how that's working on the terracotta paper. So I'm just going to push that in, and I'm not going to mind too much if it doesn't sort of cover everything, because I quite like how some of that terracotta is showing through. So I might not put more brown on to fill that up. But if you have a lighter paper or a colour that you want to cover, then you can always add more brown over the top just to fill it up, make it nice and dark. I'm just blurring the edges here between the sky and the horizon, because I just want to have a light, nice soft edge and nothing too defined for when I put my grasses in. Okay. And again, I guess you don't really need to pull it horizontally. I just feel like that's the way the dirt lies. But you could potentially, move your fingers around in circles or go up and down, or just vary it a little bit to create some bumpiness in the earth. And again, just blurring that edge a little bit. You try not to have a hard edge, because that'll be harder to cover up after the grass. I mean, it doesn't really matter. There could potentially be a hard edge right there. So you've got to think about, what's happening in nature. I've sort of blurred my path a little bit, but that's okay, because I can come back in and I can define those edges with my black or my blue violet, which I didn't put into my palette today. But if you've got the art spectrums, you'll have a blue violet, which is a very dark purple, and that's a beautiful, beautiful option to use for your shadows and your darks. It's not quite black, but it's a bit warmer than black. It's a little bit less harsh, and it's just such a nice colour. So if you don't have a blue violet, get yourself a blue violet, because you'll find lots and lots of uses for it. Lovely. So now we've got this nice bit of dirt. We've got the dirt ready to go to grow the grass. We've got a bit of a path happening there that we can tidy up afterwards. You've got your sky in there. So we're going to have a little break. If you want to spend the time in the break to put more detail in the sky, then that's by all means go ahead and do that. And we'll come back in 5 minutes or so and carry on. All right, lovely. So I'll just pause everything and I'll see you back here in 5. So it's 9:57, so at about 2 or 3 past 10. See you back here. Okay. All right, so we're going to get on to part 2 now, and I will just share my screen again. So far, it's worked very well, hasn't it? I'm very happy with this today. Lovely. So we should have your dirt all laid down, ready to grow some grass. Sky done, so if you've done any more detail on your sky, that'll be lovely. Camera, action. Just fix the focus so it doesn't keep wandering around. Yeah. Lovely. All right. So next thing we want to do now is just to start building up the grass like we did with the charcoal version. We just want to make sure that we're going to get it nice and full and lush, and that'll be using a few different colours. So like I mentioned earlier, we've got some orange and we've got some green and the browns and the blues. So let's start with the grass that's sort of at the back, I guess, and work forward. So as I mentioned earlier, it's good to work from back to front and come closer to you gradually. So we're going to start at the back because that's what is furthest away from us as far as the grass goes. I can see some kind of dark green grass, so we'll just sort of dance between the colours here, okay? Now what you're going to need to use is the end of your pastel. So if you've got a round pastel like this one, then you'll see on the edge there, you should have a fairly sharp edge, and I think most of you here have new pastels. So you'll have a fairly sharp edge to use on the end, and that's where you get your finer lines from. So no more lying down flat doing big fat marks. Now we're going to be tilting the pastels and getting a nice edge on it, like a fine line, like that. Okay, so we're going to do lots and lots of those, but you'll find as you go that you'll kind of make the edges a bit more blunt, and so it'll wear down sort of, because we're literally putting this onto sandpaper. Okay, so what will happen is your pastel will wear down, and then you'll get kind of thicker edges around there, and that's okay because then we can make thicker strands of grass, because all these bits of grass are different widths as well as heights and directions. So we can create different sort of thicknesses by using the very edge or tilting it down a little bit more onto the paper so that you're using more of the side. So then you'll get a thicker mark. Okay. And then you can come back up and do more edge ones. You can press very lightly. I'm just doing a bit of a demo here. Very lightly to get a very fine, soft little gentle mark. You can press nice and hard to get a firmer mark. So the secret is to keep varying the marks that you're making so that it starts to look quite natural. So pick up your dark green if you have a dark green, or a mid green, whatever kind of green you've got, but the darkest one you've got in your box. And we'll just start to do some very gentle little soft marks there at the back. You can see at the back there's quite a few sort of finer little bits of grass. And as things fall off into the distance, they get smaller, don't they? You can't actually have everything all the same size. The grass in the foreground looks to be quite long and a bit taller than the stuff at the back. So we want to start off with some shorter grasses at the back. And you can see I'm just trying to vary the pressure. I've left the heights to be sort of all similar. So now I'm going to put a few longer ones up in there. We want to get a bit of variation in the height as well. Otherwise it starts to look like a fence. Okay, and we're not building a fence. This is all natural. At the end of the path, we have a few little strands that kind of come across the edge of the path there. So just filling up, well, not filling, but putting quite a bit of your darker green grasses in first, and then we'll change colours and we'll add more. So on the other side, same kind of thing. I like to sort of just swish my pastel around and get different directions, different strands, trying to vary it. It's so easy to fall into a pattern and just do the same mark all the time. Try to kind of move your wrist, keep it nice and loose, go backwards and forwards and sideways and left and right, and just sort of try to mix it up a little bit. As you come across the back there and get all those lovely strands in the back, then start to move slightly forward. So I'm going to come forward a little bit and start building up the grasses in front of that last row. So I'm going to do a few kind of rows and just building it up that way. Okay, so I want to start to bring it forward. I don't know why I keep picking up lighter colours on the ends of this pastel. It's quite strange. Little flecks of white in there. See, they all behave a bit weirdly sometimes. Okay. Just put some grasses in there. And before I forget, we'll jump in and fix the path up again too before we move on too much further. Because the same as the sky, we want to get the path right because we've got grasses sort of sitting over the path. And so we need to get the path done probably next. So just keep filling up putting in some green strands here, because what we'll be doing is filling up the oranges and the yellows and all the colours that we've got to create this lovely picture of gorgeous grasses. So you can see how that's now starting to come together already, isn't it? It's already making some kind of sense. The path is kind of glowing. It's quite bright, really, isn't it? It's nice. I like it. It's like the golden path of paradise or something. All right. So what I want to do before we go on to more grasses is just get back into this little path and try and define the edges a bit more. So I've picked up my terracotta and I just want to put a bit more of that in here. And I'm just kind of swinging it across like this. It's sort of almost a zigzaggy shape of the lighter colour in the path. So keep carrying on with that. As it goes off into the distance, it gets a bit darker. We might have to darken that off a little bit. I like how the orange and the red are working nicely together. So don't be afraid to try different colours and see what they do. It's kind of fun sometimes to discover, what colours can do with each other. It's almost exciting. I think that's why I really enjoy pastels, because I can just bang a colour down on paper and then stick another one over it and blend them together and see what happens. I'm always waiting to see what happens. Okay, so I've got my orange back in there. I'm going to pop a bit more red in, or pink. It looks more pinky to me. So a bit of that colour through there just for fun, because it looks kind of nice and bright. I like brights. And remember I said before we need to darken off around the edges of the path. So to do that, if you've got a blue violet there, which I probably should go and find, or a black, then I'll just use black because it's here. What we want to do is just get some dark down into the edges of the path there to kind of define it a little bit, and then make it sit out from the grasses and the dirt. So I'm just doing these soft little squiggly lines down the side of the path there, just to give it a bit of definition. Okay, and then you can kind of pull a couple of them into the path, because that'll be where there's little crevices and grooves and bumps and things. And we want to make it look like it's rough and it's not a man-made path at all. It's probably made by man walking on it too much, but it's all dirt or sand. And darkening off at the back there, so where the path wanders off into the distance, I'm going to darken that off a little bit so it sort of disappears, and we'll cover some of that up with the grasses so that it gets a little bit lost in the distance there. I have left a little bit of a glow just on the very edge of the pinky orangey colour, just so you can sort of see a tiny bit of path, which makes you want to go and have a look. So it's always good when you're doing your artwork, it's good to think about, what's the viewer going to see in here? How are they going to feel when they look at this? Do you want people to be, look at your art and go, oh, wow, that's beautiful? I do, that's what I want. Or do you want them to feel peaceful, excited? And it's going to be the feelings that you experience when you see the image or take the photo or whatever it is, and imagine painting it. So I get very excited when I find beautiful images that have strong shadows and strong lights, because to me that's what is exciting to paint. But different people will have different reasons, and so you really need to think about how much impact your painting's going to have either on you or the viewer, and then think about how can I make this more dramatic or interesting or exciting or peaceful or serene, or whatever the mood is that you want to create. So I've just sort of smudged in some of that black with my fingers just to soften off the edges a little bit there. I've only pressed very lightly because I still want to keep that dark quite dark. I don't want to soften it off too much, because if you push too hard, it'll just sort of get lost in all the browns, and then you'll have to define it again, which we can do. I feel like I probably need to do that already. So you can come back in, see like this, and you can press a bit harder and then just let that sit on the surface and not push it in, just to get a bit more drama in there. I like drama in my art, but you know, that breathtaking kind of drama. But you know, art can tell a story too. So for instance, this picture, you know, for me, I want to go and see what's at the end of the path. So creating curiosity and interest. Okay. Gentle, gentle. Just not blending too much. You'll probably get a bit of dust like I've got. So you'll have to tip that off your page. Try not to blow it. Okay. I'm going to try a little bit of dark green in here just because I want to see what happens. And I know it's going to go muddy because green and red are complementary, and put together they'll make lovely mud or beautiful grey kind of earthy colours. And they're lovely when you want to get some natural kinds of greys and earthy tones into your artwork. So that's the other secret too, when you mix your complementary colours together. So if I mix red and green, I'm going to get lovely browns. And that's what we want in here. It's beautiful, earthy sort of tone. There we go. So now that looks like it's, you know, got a bit of light shining on in a couple of spots. It's got some bumps and lumps and ridges and things like that. And it looks interesting. I like that little glow. If you wanted to later on, you could even try and pop a bit of the red in the sky. I probably shouldn't do this because I might muck it up. I'm going to see what happens if I make it like a sunset sky. You know, if I put red in here, it's going to turn to purple. But that's okay. Actually, the artist in the original picture has done that. So there you go. Oh, I'm probably copying and didn't realise it. Yeah. A little bit of that just to tie that in with the colour of the path. That's fun. That'd be nice. All right, so that's the path done for now. We can always come back and fix it or change it later on. I'm just going to tip off some of this dust. There we go. Okay, and then we'll get stuck into growing some more grass. So we've used green. Now we might pick up, let's try some orange or terracotta, whatever you have in your box. So do the same kind of thing with that one. So now we're getting it a bit thicker, starting at the back, varying your heights and your pressure. And just building this up to be nice and thick, and then coming forward. So just because we've used green once doesn't mean we can't pick that up again. So we'll probably add a bit more green as we go, because we're building layers now. So it takes a little while. If you don't have much patience, it's a bit tricky doing this. But just keep that pastel loose in your hand. Try not to hang on to it too tight. Keep it sort of loose in your fingers. Let it wander across the page and do its thing. So the orange is a kind of a lightish colour compared to the colour of the earth. So that's nice. And then we can add maybe some more brown or black in to get a bit of darkness in there. Actually, I want to put some blue in. I like putting blue in here. It's lovely. Because again, your blue and orange are complementary. So just building up those layers, working from the back to the front, because the front ones are kind of tall and they sit up in front of the back ones, don't they? So we need to create that feeling of distance. If you do them all the same, or you know, do it from left to right or whatever, not back to front, then it's all going to look the same height. So see, as you come forward, you put them in a bit taller and in front of the ones that are already there. So we're creating that feeling of distance, of stuff being in the background. I'm just going to go back in there and put a bit more in. the other goal we want to try and achieve in the back there is to kind of lose that horizon line. So we don't want that to be too defined or too strong. Okay, and then moving over onto the other side. Speak up if I'm going too quickly. When I taught classes live, it was much easier because I could see what everyone was doing and I could slow myself down or speed up. But you can't see what you're doing, so it's a bit tricky if you're feeling a bit left behind. Just speak up and I'll slow down. So I don't want you to feel like that. Just say, wait for me. Okay, now isn't that amazing? Just one more colour and a few more strands of grass and it's already starting to look really lush and thick and grassy and interesting. I know it's not a terribly interesting picture. It's probably not something you'd want to hang up, but it's a really good practice to do this grass. And remember too, some of the grasses bend over, so they have little bends in them like this one. So you can have a little, a few little bent ones that just to break up the monotony, I guess. And do some little horizontal tips as well, just to keep it interesting. All grasses are not the same. And we just put just a couple of strands over the front of that little path there. We don't want to cover up too much of it and we want to leave room for other colours as well. So this isn't the final colour, so we're going to add other colours and build it up even thicker. So just restrain yourself a little bit if you feel like you're going over the top with this particular colour or this grass, because we'll come back in and put more down now. In a minute. I'm going to grab the brown, even though we've got brown in the background or black or whatever you used. Just pop a bit of that in too, because that's going to sort of break up some of the grasses. See how it just sort of intersects on those strands of grass and breaks them up a little bit to create some variation in the colour. Lovely, lovely. Might do one long one of the brown. And then again, same procedure. So we're just working from back to front and coming forward. I'm hardly lifting my pastel off the paper. I'm sort of just leaving it on there, letting it swish around, using the edge of it so I'm getting my fine lines, and then pressing harder here and there and lighter mostly, just to build up that thick, beautiful lines. And you can add more over this. This paper will take probably about 4 or 5 layers of pastel before it's too full. So I like how that's made it all look a bit thicker. It's broken up the lines of the grass. So we're just going to get little glimpses of the pieces of grass rather than the full strands, or what do you call them? Grasses. Terrible with names of things. So just doing the same thing on the other side. And your black might be nice too. If you want to pick up a black, if you haven't already, you can try a bit of black. Just for, not too much though, just put a few strands of black in, because we don't want to make this really dark and heavy. But it's good to have the darks because then the lights will pop. Remember, you've got to always have dark to make the light pop. Just putting a few strands of black in there just to create a bit more contrast. Not too much, just a little bit. So remember, dark black is quite a heavy sort of colour, and like I said earlier, I don't tend to use it a lot unless I want to create really strong drama in my art. And as someone said to me recently, you know, there's actually no black in nature. It's everything that's dark is not made of black. It's got purples or blues or, you know, browns in it. So that was an interesting thing to be aware of. Okay, so that's enough black. I'm not going to OD on black here. Let's come back in now. I don't know if you have another green or not. I've got quite a nice green here. This one, it's sort of a mid-green, like a grassy green. Not too bright, but just a sort of a mid-green. And there's a fair bit of green in here, so we can add a bit of that too. So coming back in, same thing, just varying your lengths and your pressure, and building that up nice and thick. So because we've got darks under here, the green is looking light, and that's okay, that's good. Because you've got to think about that, you know, you can't have just all darks, because then it's just going to turn into a big black mess. So you've got to have little touches of bright here and there to give it the contrast. So this green is not very bright. I've got much brighter ones there. Don't know, I might just use a few of those. So now we're sort of doing a bit less grass because we've got our basics already in place. And so now we're sort of looking at refining what we've already got there. So how can we, you know, add a few bright strands of grass and then a few darker ones, and how can we create more depth? I think most of the background grass is pretty much done. I might just add a little bit more. This is the trouble, so you want to keep adding and adding and adding, and then you get to the point where you think, oh, can't add anymore. It won't stick to the paper. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of tall ones there at the back in the dark green. Maybe the brown, try brown. So there's a couple of big tall ones, those bulrush type things. So just try to keep your mark fairly light and loose. Don't make patterns. Try to keep your marks going in different directions because we don't want them all to look the same. You don't have to put them exactly where they are in the picture either. You can spread them out a little bit. So on those bulrushes, they've got those little ends on them, haven't they? A little bit thicker than the stem. So to achieve that, you just want to put your pastel down, and again using the edge of it like you would if you were drawing the stem. Then just press a bit firmer and you should hopefully create a bit of a thicker mark that you can just put on the end like that. Give it a little rub if you need to make it a bit heavier. And got a fair bit of dust, and because we're on a light background, we don't want to blend that in because it's just going to make your sky dirty. So I have to tip it off. Okay, and then just over on the other side, we've got one over there. And a few tall strands of grass. Just going to add a few more long ones there at the back. I might use my greens again. Dark green that we started off with. And just fill up a little bit more at the back there so that those ones don't look like they're just sticking out there from nowhere. So you can see you can use all kinds of colours in here. Let's try a bit of blue. See what happens. This beautiful dark-ish ultramarine blue is really nice for shadows. So I'm going to put some of that in because that will really, yeah, lovely. See that? It's just made it so much more interesting and warm. These earthy colours can get a bit dead looking after a while. And so when you're looking to brighten them up sometimes, think, you know, Uluru and Outback Australia and scenes like that, there's a lot of red and orange and yeah, sometimes there's some beautiful colours. But if it's feeling like it's getting a bit too dull, try adding your blue, your complementaries. Or reds are lovely too. So I'm just flicking a bit of blue through here. That's going to create some really nice shadow effects. So your blues and purples are beautiful for shadows, really, really nice. Can't get enough blue and purple. Can't get enough of anything really when it comes to this. Okay, so just a few over on the other side as well. You might not like the blue. If you don't like it, then don't do it. Put red in instead. I'm going to put red in as well, see what happens. This isn't anything precious, so you can actually have a bit of a play with it. Don't be afraid to play. See, that's nice too. I like the red. It kind of reflects some of the path. You can make a few of them a little bit more defined just here in the front. See how that glows? So you don't always need whites and bright light colours to get that glow happening. You can use other colours based on your painting. So because this is mostly a darkish painting, this reddy or pinky colour kind of glows in amongst everything because we've got it in the path. I'm going to press a little bit harder and get some more of it in there, just to give it some highlights. It's nice. I like that, how it just sort of shines from in between all those grasses. And a little bit of the pinky red through the grass is lovely. That's telling me maybe the sun's catching it somewhere. It's just starting to, you know, get the ends of it. Perhaps you don't have to do full strands of the highlighted ones. You can just do some little tips, subtle little tips that might be just, you know, all on the ends there. It's lovely, nice. Just going to pop a bit more grass at the end of the path there. It's sort of a dead end and I want to get it to look like it's wandering off down a hill or something. So put some grass over that. And we'll have to wonder where it goes. So pick up whatever colour you want to pick up now. It's time to sort of just get a little bit loose and free, experiment a little bit. I want to put some yellow in there. I think yellow would be quite nice. But would it really? Yeah, maybe. Let's see. See, I can always go over it and get rid of it. It doesn't have any good. So we've kind of got all our grass in now, and now we're just sort of looking at getting some little highlights in. It's nice, isn't it? This is a very creamy yellow. It's going on really nice. You might find your yellows are a bit hard. Sometimes they're a bit hard and they won't sort of stick very easily. If that's happening, maybe try white. As I said, I prefer to use, you know, yellows and golds to white often because I find white's just a little bit too, I don't know, black, a bit like black really. But just a few very subtle, well, not subtle are they, but gentle strands of yellow through here is nice because it's just giving me some sunshine. See how that warms it up? Makes it so much warmer and sunnier. Whereas if I had used white, like they've done in the artwork actually, in the reference photo, you can see they've put white in some of those grasses at the front there. It looks nice, but it's not as warm as this. So again, it's down to personal taste, whether you prefer the white cool look, because to me the painting looks like a a cool winter, cold winter's day, because all those colours are quite cool. And you can imagine, you know, it's probably quite windy and it's a bit freezing and you've got a coat on, going for a walk to the beach. Whereas this one that I've just done looks a whole lot warmer. It's almost like a sunny day and I might want to go for a swim because it's feeling like it's hot. So colours can do that. You can influence your art with your colours and create moods and feelings, and it's so much fun. So don't hesitate to try using different colours. I did pick up a bright green, but I haven't put that in. I think it might be a bit of overkill if I do. But as I said, this is not something we're going to frame or put into any exhibitions unless you feel inclined, but it's just a practice piece really. So it's just fun to play, experiment, see what happens. I can't stop putting this yellow in, but I have to stop or it's going to lose its impact. So if I put too much in, it won't be bright anymore. And then all the darks will be wasted because we've put the darks in so that we can add those beautiful brights and get everything to kind of shine and glow. So I'm going to stop right there before I wreck it. It's easy to keep going and wrecking things. What I did want to show you though, because we've got a little bit of time, was what you can do to reuse your papers. So I'll just grab X painting. Okay, so I've just got an old little practice painting. I'll put the other one back afterwards. So you can have a look. This is just a little, I was doing a daily challenge thing and, you know, some still life stuff. So it's just my little man. And this is colour fixed paper. So it's the paper that we use all the time, most of the time. So it's pretty hardy and it'll take some water, which is fun because we can reuse these pieces of paper. So if you don't want to keep your painting or you don't like it or whatever, you can literally grab a brush. This is dirty water, by the way, because I haven't cleaned it. Just a stiff brush is better. And you can put this on to your paper, and just keeping in mind that different pastels behave differently. So depending on the brand I use, which I can't remember, see that bluey colour there, it's not quite washing in as well, but you can literally just wash in the painting. Right? And I like to use quite a bit of water because I'll show you in a minute. I like to tip it up and let it dribble, and it does all these really cool patterns. And then you've got these fun backgrounds to play with. So it's not just plain coloured paper anymore. It's really interesting backgrounds that usually go sort of grey, because by the time you mix all these colours together, whatever colours you've used, it goes sort of this kind of grey colour. But it still creates a really interesting background to then work on and create something else. See how some of the pastel sort of is almost waterproof, or I don't know what it is, but it just won't talk to the water, and that's okay. It must be that colour. So I think actually that's an Art Spectrum Extra Soft. So they're the square ones, not the round ones that you've probably got, but the little squares. You buy them, they look like this. That's an Art Spectrum Extra Soft. So I think those are the ones that don't play nicely with water, but that's okay. All right, so I've got my water on there. I'll just grab a paper towel. Okay, so if I tip this up, and you can do this on an easel, so you can just leave it there to dry or whatever. Let's try and show you. See how it's sort of all starting to run? A bit hard to see, isn't it? Okay, so see how it's starting to run a little bit? You can see all the water kind of dribbling, You can add more. Just let it sort of dribble down. And it makes these really cool patterns. It's a lot of fun. So you can still sort of see my man, but that's okay. But I could potentially paint a vase of flowers or something like that. And I've got this very interesting background, and it'll dry fairly soon, like it'll probably take about a half hour or so, depending on how much water you've used. But it'll dry off, and then you can just use it as you would normally, normal paper. And you can turn it around and dribble it in all kinds of ways. The other fun thing you can do is get paper towel like this and just smoosh on it. And that creates even more interesting texture. Okay. So now I've got this fun background that I can use to paint something else on top of.
So it still keeps its tooth, Jeanne?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
You can even, you know, rub it if you wanted to, just to smudge it more a bit more. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. The other thing you can use is alcohol. So, you know, your liquid alcohol that you buy in the art shops, that will also do similar things. It'll dry a lot quicker, but I don't like the smell of it. So I'll show you one I prepared earlier. If I can find it, that is. This is a piece that I think I had like an ocean view or something on it. And I added some red ink into it when it was wet, and I let it dribble, and I sort of just brushed it down. So now it's made this really nice, interesting background. That's an A3 sheet, so it's quite big. So I can use that for something. This was one of my other little daily exercises that I did, but I used recycled paper for that. So you can see all the grey in the background there. And that just makes it more interesting, because you've got all this interesting texture and different colours kind of washing through in the background. So it's a really nice base for different, you know, paintings and things. So you don't need to waste your paper, is what I'm getting at. It's a great way to use your papers, or reuse them, I should say. So I've got lots that I have washed off and are ready to use for something else. This was another one that I did. So that was my daughter's birthday cheesecake I made. But this was all, you know, purples and whites and stuff in the background. And so you don't have to fill the background in very much. You can just kind of use it as your main background if you want to. And you can do all this very deliberately too. If you want to, you know, create really interesting backgrounds, and you can use water and alcohol and all sorts of stuff. Inks, gouache, watercolour, whatever you like. So it's kind of fun. So you're not just limited to pastels only. You see, things
And
get
so
more.
any of those that you use on there, like the inks and things, that's the same. It still keeps the tooth on the paper. And wow.
Yeah.
I got so much alcoholic like stuff that I was going to throw out. But
no, God, no, don't throw that out. God, that stuff's worth a fortune.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good to know.
Yeah, so you can mix your medias quite nicely, and these papers will take all kinds of media, you know. They won't take miles and miles of water, but, you know, you could do a couple of coats on there. It's good. Very good. The other thing you can do is use watercolour paper and buy the ground. So the ground is like a gesso, but it's specific for pastels. And you can paint that onto any surface really, whether it be wood or watercolour paper or anything, and that will give you this texture. So it's like a gritty gesso type paint, and you can
buy
just
called ground.
Yeah, pastel ground.
Pastel ground.
Yeah. And you can get that in the different colours as well. So you can buy it in all the colours of the paper that you can buy. So you can get it in the blacks and the pinks and purples and so forth. So you can actually apply that to any surface and create your own pastel surface. Yeah. So good for if you want to paint onto wood, but that's a bit tricky because then you've got to varnish it or seal it somehow. I'll show you what I did. So when I was working at Art Shed, we had a staff exhibition, and for that we all had to paint onto these round boards. And I thought, oh lordy, you can't put pastel on board. But I did, because I could get the black ground, which is what you can see on the edge there. And this is just a board basically that you can buy in the art shop, and painted the ground over that. And then I did my pastel on it. And then I sealed it with a varnish. So it's actually sealed now. So it's fine. But the varnish will make it dull. So you do lose some of your brightness when you seal it, because it kind of wets it. So all your brightness goes away. So then what I did was get some, I think it was acrylic paint, and just dabbed my little bright bits for the trees with my acrylic. And I did a bit of white acrylic through there for the waves.
And that was on top of the varnish?
Yeah, on top of the varnish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so lots of different ways you can do things.
Yeah.
You've just got to play a little bit. But yeah. I would like to find a way to seal the pastels successfully without losing the brights on a hard surface, so I don't have to frame everything, because it gets really expensive.
Yeah.
I had a quote yesterday for that big one behind me to frame it, and it's $500 with beautiful glass, like it's going to be a beautiful frame, but it's a lot of money, isn't it, to be paying out. Anyway, them's the breaks. It's what us poor artists do. Alrighty, so there's a few hints and tips in there today, little bonus. All right, so I think, how are you going with your grasses? Do you want to go back over to the other screen now, have a look, see what you've done? Because I think I'm pretty much finished with mine. So we might do that. But before I do though, just don't forget to sign the painting like that. Charcoal pencil or pastel pencil is the best option. And you can use one of the colours in your artwork. It doesn't have to be black or white. Do whatever you like. So I'll switch over now to the other screen. There we are. How's everybody going? Nobody's talking. You've all gone quiet. Oh, Louise, that looks fabulous. Are you happy? Yeah.
Yeah, I am happy. It looks good.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, well done. Yeah,
that was fun.
Good job.
Cheers.
That's great. Yeah, lovely. It'll look even better from a distance later. Oh,
I have a problem that I keep making smudges. Oh, wow, Janelle.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful.
Gee, that sky's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that. So
really good.
lush.
Yeah.
Oh, if I were you, can you hold that up again for me, Janelle? Yeah. What you need to do is in those front rows, just put a few longer ones that sort of come up a bit further in front of the back ones, if you know what I mean. So if you make some of those front grasses taller, just a few. Yeah. I can't hear you. You're on mute. There you are.
Sorry.
That's okay. Does that make sense? So if you make some of those taller, it'll sort of, because it looks like you've got like rows of different heights, but if you bring some of those up in front, it'll sort of bring it all together. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Maris. And how are you going, Karen? Oh, doesn't that look lovely? Very nice. Love your colours.
Lovely, lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
I think I need to do that too, because I can see rows in mine.
Yeah.
So just at the front, some longer ones.
Yeah, and it just come over your path a little bit too with a few bits of grass.
Okay.
Just to sort of break up that hard line of the path and make it a little bit softer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I should do that too. A little bit more. Yeah. Yeah. And so lovely. Everybody happy? Had a good lesson?
Yes, thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Good,
Yeah, really
good,
good.
good. Happier than yesterday. That's good. Clouds is always the hardest one. Everybody struggles with that one. But we got it out of the way early. So
We got there.
yeah, we got there. And now it's just all fun from here on in.
Yay.
Woohoo, woohoo. All right. Well, what I'll do is sign off for now. And
Thank you.
my pleasure, my pleasure. Lovely, lovely. And I would really love at the end of the week if you want to send me photos of all your pieces, that'd be fabulous too. And I can pop them in the newsletter and stuff. Don't have to, but even if it's only the ones you like, that'd be great. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
That
you
was
so
great
much.
fun.
Pleasure. Have a lovely day.
Bye,
Bye,
ladies.
everybody.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.